This here is a 60% keyboard known as the K70 RGB Pro Mini Wireless. And the first thing I'm going to critique off the bat with this keyboard is that it's targeted towards gamers, but they're still using Cherry MX switches. Now, from the previous keyboard reviews I've done here at Tech Yes City, people have voiced their concerns over using Cherry MX switches in 2022 when the competition are starting to use switches with a lot faster actuation times, but not even that. They also got the ability to change those actuation points to where you desire. The Cherry MX Silver has an actuation point of 1.2 millimeters and bottoms out at 3.4. Now you can also get this keyboard in the Cherry MX Red flavor, which actuates at 2 millimeters and bottoms out at 4 millimeters. And the switches are 3-pin hot swappable switches this time around, meaning if you don't like Cherry MX Silvers or Reds, you can swap them out for a different 3-pin mechanical switch. Of course, they also include the keycap puller and the switch puller is in the box, as well as a spare escape and spacebar key. However, there is no included wrist rest with this keyboard, which for $180 for a keyboard, I'd actually like to see a wrist rest included in the box. However, with those negatives out of the way, it's time to get onto the positives with the K70 Mini, and there's actually quite a few positives here. The first being the iCue software, which is very easy to use. It links up with other Corsair gear. If you've got a Corsair cooler, for example, or Corsair memory or Corsair mouse, you can have it so that all the lighting links together, and you can put on an RGB display for your new girlfriend and impress the living shit out of her if you have the iCue software installed. Though in terms of the functionality of this software, it's incredibly versatile to the point where you can customize different macros very quickly and easily, save them to different profiles. You can also independently remap the keys and assign custom functions to those, so they're not going to be a disaster if you try to use the key normally. Though when it comes to functionality, here is my favorite part of this keyboard, and that is the easy laid out text that they've used on the PBT keycaps. Now, each of these caps weigh in at 2 grams. The keyboard weighs in a little over 600 grams, so it is pretty lightweight considering the construction quality is really good, but the function keys stand out. They're so easy to read, and the fact that they've added them on the side plane as opposed to the top really makes it easy to use this as a full-size keyboard, even though of course it's tedious to use your function key versus a full-size keyboard. If you're saving that space, you'll definitely appreciate the utility that this brings. An extra added touch is also the ability to emulate a mouse from the keyboard via using the WASD keys, and then also the Q and E will emulate a left and right click mouse button. Now, in terms of connectivity, they've got USB-C, which is included with a 1.8 meter braided cable. They've got wireless, which they're using their slipstream technology, and they've got the ability to pair it to 3 Bluetooth devices. Though in terms of the profiles already available, if you're connected via iCue, you can open up 16 plus an additional 12 Light Link profiles, or if you're running it from the hardware or the wireless connection, you can then get access to 14 different pre-programmed profiles for the RGB. Now, each of the keys have RGB emanating from the base of the key switch itself, but one thing I will critique here is it seems like it's a little bit dim for Corsair, where with Corsair products, usually the RGB it just comes out of nowhere and it really hits you in the face. Even on max brightness, the RGB seems a little bit tame here, which I'm kind of personally in the fence of. With Corsair, they always did RGB and they always did it to the max. So I'd like to see this thing blast out a little bit more RGB if they were to do a reiteration of a keyboard in the future of a similar stature. Now onto the performance of the keyboard, where in the past I've tested this thing out for the latency, especially on the wired connection, and it works really well. This time around I did play games on the wired, the wireless, and the Bluetooth, and the Bluetooth did add some perceivable noticeable input lag versus the wireless and the wired connections. I couldn't tell any difference between wireless and wired. They did appear very responsive on both fronts to me, and that's due to the wireless having what Corsair calls their slipstream technology, which basically adds in no input lag. The battery life on wireless and Bluetooth they claim is 30 hours with the full RGB effects on, and 200 hours without it off. Now, I did use this as a benchmark keyboard, and I got about 25 hours of use before the battery ran out with RGB on. So the claims are pretty good. You will get the battery life that they're stating. Thought about a typing test and a sound test. Let's quickly move on to that, where I was able to get around 120 words per minute on a take here on Type Racer. So as I was typing, there was a little bit of wobble and playing the keys, nothing too serious, but I would like to see Corsair get it to the point where the keys are just rock solid and they don't wobble at all, which other keyboard manufacturers are starting to do, especially at this price point. Now, in terms of the dimensions of this keyboard, 292mm by 106, and then at the base, 34mm tall, going back to the rear at 40mm tall, which then has the adjustable heights on the bottom of the keyboard, which then make it go up to 45mm. And with all that information out of the way, it's time to take a look at a conclusion and give you guys my thoughts and opinions on the K70 RGB Pro Mini wireless. And the most important talking point here is the $180 price tag placed with where the product stands on the market and who is it intended for. And I think with the slipstream technology, the 8000 Hertz polling over USB-C, I'd say this is intended for a hardcore gamer who wants the absolute best in terms of getting the lowest latency as well as getting the most consistent experience. And here's where Corsair really have to change things up, and I would say start exploring using other switches that have not just faster actuation points as we talked about before, but adjustable actuation points, which I'm sure gamers can then play around with and get the best feel for their own keyboard customization, and then save that to the profile, and they'll be having really happy days, as opposed to with this keyboard here, it's kind of happy days, but $180 and the competitors are introducing different switches that are superior. That leaves Corsair in a unique position. And so Corsair have to make up for those negatives by offering positives in the other areas. And here's where they definitely do that in terms of the iCue software, very polished, very easy to use, and the hardware profiles are very easy to adjust. You also got the Bluetooth, the wireless, and the USB-C connectivity, and I never had this keyboard crash out once. It worked perfectly. There was no problems or hiccups the whole time I was using this for this review. And it is a very solid 60% keyboard. None of the keycaps fall off easily, so if you want to travel with this thing, it is going to make for a great travel companion. And also for the end key rollover, I did a spam test here and it passed with flying colors, meaning that you're not going to have an issue with registering key presses, no matter how many keys you are pressing. Lastly, there's also PlayStation mode, so if you're having any compatibility issues with console, you can go to a computer, try turn this on, and then you should be good to go with your console. Though there is no dedicated Mac mode, so if you're looking for a Mac dedicated keyboard, you may wish to look elsewhere. Though with all that out of the way, the last question lingering on your mind would you get this keyboard for yourself, Brian? And the answer is no. I actually prefer my full-size keyboards, and even if I'm traveling, I prefer 10 keyless, as I love having access to those arrow keys and delete functions, especially if I've got to get into the BIOS. It is a bit of a pain using a function key instead of just using delete and arrow keys to maneuver around in that BIOS freely. Now, another thing is too, I prefer for my full-size keyboards, ergonomic keyboards, and this is one thing, like it's not just the switches that we critiqued in today's review. I've been critiquing the shapes of keyboards where Microsoft's patent has run out for the Microsoft ergonomic, which means all the keyboard manufacturers can make ergonomic keyboards if they wish to, but I'm not seeing really any custom keyboard manufacturers release mainstream ergonomic keyboards now with mechanical switches or optical switches. I'd love to see this happen. So Corsair, if you're going to change up some switches in the future, try and maybe offer an ergonomic shaped keyboard as well. I'd be absolutely over the moon with that, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button. Also, we got the question of the day here, which comes from Joey Justinani, and they ask, why no options to change case color? It's just the blackest. So with that question, they're referring to a video that we did. I'll put the link up here where we critiqued a PC pre-built company called Starforge Systems. In that video, I did talk about the limited options available, but in terms of why they don't offer any different cases or different case colors, I would have no idea. I'm not Starforge Systems. I really have very limited contact with them in terms of I've only just sent them one email. They sent me an email, then I sent them an email back, and I've never heard back from them since. So that'd be a question you would have to ask them directly, maybe via their contact us form. So hopefully that answers that question. And with that aside, if you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye. As I go on the 101 highway, and it's taking me back to the start.